Everyone who owns a Bible recognizes there is a division in this magnificent book. Old Testament versus New Testament. Old Covenant versus New Covenant. Why then is there such a blurring between those designations in the religious practices of so many people? Because there is a blurring of that line. There are many groups that actually pull things from the Old Testament back into how they worship God today as individuals who classify themselves as Christians. Does that really make sense? The Apostle Paul made a statement to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. This way it reads in the New King James. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Rightly dividing is a term that is used by Paul that really focuses upon his vocation. He was trained as a Pharisee, but as far as vocation, he was a tent maker. The word that's translated rightly dividing the word of truth literally means cut right on the line. And he pictures somebody that would come out of that kind of background. Makes perfect sense to somebody that would be a seamstress. When you put that pattern on the material, you cut right on the line. Cut inside the line, you ruin the pattern, number one, but there is no way that what you try to sew together is going to look right. You didn't cut on the line. If you cut outside the line, you've wasted material. Cut right on the line. Rightly divide the word of truth. See that distinction and live by it. The last occasion we were together, we talked about the first few verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, noting that Paul is talking about the life of those Christians in the city of Corinth as becoming a living message. The embodiment of those principles was something they needed to be living in their life. They need to be showing that example of Christianity to everybody that saw the way that they lived, what they said, the dedication, the commitment they had to following what Jesus actually prescribed. There's another subject in that chapter, however, that I'd like to address for the time we have together on this occasion. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 deals with a series of contrasts between the Old Covenant, the law of Moses, and the New Covenant, the gospel of Christ. It's worded in various ways. In verse number 3, the contrast is between something that is written with ink versus something that is written by the Spirit of the living God. The contrast continues, something that is written on tablets of stone versus something written on tablets of flesh, that is, tablets of the heart. In verse number 6, Paul says that God had made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. There's another contrast. The letter kills, the Spirit gives life. There's another contrast. Verse number 7 and 8, another contrast. Verse 7, if the ministry of death, written and engraved on stones, was glorious. The contrast, verse number 8, how will the ministry of the Spirit not be more glorious? Contrasts continue to exist. Verse number 9, if the ministry of condemnation had glory, the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. In contrast, and sounds kind of harsh in the way that he's actually viewing the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the covenant that God gave to the nation of Israel through Moses. And yet that law actually pointed out the horrendous nature of transgressing the law of God, how wrong sin was, how terrible evil was, the problem of wickedness within the heart and in one's actions. And the very fact that they had to bring sacrifices to appease that wrath of God, but those sacrifices had to be continuously brought over and over again. They really couldn't take away that transgression and that sin. It made it very obvious to those individuals who were following that law of Moses how horrible sin was, how ineffective they were, and the fact that they never could atone for their own sins. So when Paul refers to it as a ministry of death written and engraved on stones, it was something that pointed out that kind of transgression and the end thereof being something that was death, not life. Something far greater is found in Christ Jesus. When Paul is writing to Christians in the province of Galatia, we've actually talked about this on several occasions in connection with what he writes to the Christians in Corinth. He makes a statement in Galatians chapter 3, beginning in verse 21. Is the law then against the promises of God? Certainly not. If there had been a law given which could have given life, truly righteousness would have been given by the law. But the Scriptures confined all under sin, that the promise by faith in Jesus Christ might be given to those who believe. Before faith came, we were kept under guard by the law, kept for the faith which would afterward be revealed. A purpose for it, but it wasn't meant to be an eternal covenant, an eternal testament. There was a limit to it. It pointed us to the Christ. In fact, considering that kind of idea, in chapter 4, he makes a statement in verse 9, now after you have known God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements to which you desire again to be in bondage? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I'm afraid for you, lest I have labored for you in vain. In fact, within those early congregations, especially where there was Jew and Gentile, the Jews tried to impress upon the Gentiles the fact that they need to keep the law of Moses as well. There is a huge meeting in Jerusalem that's recorded in Acts chapter 15 about that very thing. The end result, can't bind the law of Moses upon the Gentiles. The law of Moses was not something that was meant to be lasting. Interesting what he states in Romans chapter 7 as he's writing Christians in Rome, again about the same kind of topic. Because he makes a statement in chapter 7 and verse 6, we've been delivered from the law, having died to what we were held by, that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. That's very similar to what he actually writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. And then he makes this statement. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. On the contrary, I would not have known sin except through the law, for I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet. Wait a minute, we're delivered from the law that includes you shall not covet? That means we're delivered from the Ten Commandments. We're delivered from every aspect of that law of Moses. That isn't being a shock to a lot of people in the religious world. In fact, if you ask some people on the street, are we still under the Ten Commandments today? In a lot of instances, you'll have somebody says, well, yes, those principles we still need to follow. Followed up with a question. Followed by the question says, oh, so you still follow Moses? And again, in most instances, they're going, well, no, I don't follow Moses, I follow Jesus. But you're saying that we need to follow the law of Moses. The answer to those who are astute may actually come back, well, Jesus said he didn't come to destroy the law. He came to fulfill it. And that's true. But I want you to look at the context in which that statement is found. Context, context, context. It's in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5. That statement is found in verse 17, but I want you to notice what Jesus says in verse 18 as well. Here's verse 17 of Matthew 5. Do not think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And someone says, see, that's what I said. I told you that. Read the next verse. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. What did Jesus just say? Till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. What did Jesus say he came to do? Verse 17. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. The question, did Jesus accomplish what he said he was going to do? Did Jesus fulfill the law? He said he came to fulfill the law. If he didn't, the work of Jesus was incomplete. Jesus did not accomplish what he said his purpose was. I came to fulfill the law. Did he do that? If he did, verse 18, it's passed away. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. You continue reading through the Sermon on the Mount, and over again, Jesus tells the crowd, you've heard that it was said, and then he quotes something from that old covenant, from the law of Moses. And then he says, But I say to you. And in every one of those instances, he's dealing with what the old law was focusing on was action. What Jesus focuses upon is attitude. It's not just enough to have a correct action. It's more significant to have the right attitude. If you get the attitude right, you get the heart right, the actions will not be wrong. The world needs to learn that in a very real way today. The world needs to work on the attitude. Have the attitude of Christ. The actions are going to be a whole lot better than the actions that you see taking place on the nightly news. Contrast. Old versus new. Law of Moses versus gospel of Christ. Shows up in so many places. Galatians 3, Galatians 4, Romans 7, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, or 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Interesting chapter. And there's still more verses that deal with that particular contrast, and I hope you recognize those and dwell on those as you read through that chapter and beyond in 2 Corinthians this week. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.